Marky Billson, Tri-City Sports Now, talking to an old friend. Nobody covers the Southern SoCon John Hooper for midmajormadness.com. He hired Bobby Bowden, and well, the rest is history. We're about ready to kick off the football season. Odd timing, John Hooper, but why a basketball story now? Just the week before college football starts, John Hooper.
Well, I mean, I had some free time on my hands.
Okay.
I figured, why not? Why not look at the top 5 teams that the league and J. Elmore's son, John. There's just been a great story to the league, and I think a great at it. Just give my opinion on some of the teams that.
This because I think that when people start writing about best of all time, they don't read a book. And, sports writing is not scouting. It's not just the people that you saw play. And taking into account all eras. How can you argue against the Southern Conference team?
Rebounds like that anymore. And I think that it's tough to find those guys on a year-to-year basis. There's only a one, Mr. Jennings. There's only one time Steph Curry. They only come around so often. So. And
it should be said that those players kind of fell. Conference men's basketball team was 2008 Davidson with Seth Curry that went to the Elite Eight. Play at the end and had Curry take the final shot instead of Jason Richards, that they would have gone on and won the national championship. My opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Jerry West was there in 58 as well for West Virginia. So you've got the Mountaineers. Remember, they were a Southern Conference team through 1969. And they made the NCAA tournament that year as well. You've got them in the 50. Davidson and very famous, coached Ralph Sampson at Virginia when the Cavaliers were number 1, took the Cavaliers to the Final Four in 1983, I believe, but all successful.
You look at, and they didn't, you look at that, I think it was Georgia and Illinois, and then should have beaten, probably played pretty well against Providence. Providence had a guy named Shamgar.
Oh, yeah, remember him well. He took over. The final was a 9-point victory, I believe. They kind of, yeah. It was a competitive game, but at the end, Friars, pulled away with free throws and the like. Yeah, if memory serves. And I mean, I even remember in the Tri-Cities in 97, people were into Chattanooga. We got to watch this game. I mean, bitterest of ETSU rivals, but just like the SEC. Unless it's Georgia playing Alabama. If it's Alabama versus Miami in the national championship game, everybody is rooting for Alabama in the SEC, even Tennessee, maybe even Auburn, which is kind of, yeah. Well, at least Tennessee is, but or so I've been told. You hear that SEC chant and such. But you mentioned, Chattanooga. What about 75 VMI, which was nationally ranked and won an NCAA tournament game against Duquesne? Or what about 64 Davidson, which actually began the season ranked #1 by Sports Illustrated? How close were those teams to making your list of 5?
Those two in the 82, 83 mock were tough to leave off the list. You had originally to make a top 5. So for that reason alone, I think I did a top 5 because it was tough. It's like, who do you leave out? I mean, it's tough to leave out any of those teams because you look at the players that they had, and particularly the one you mentioned, the 64 Davidson, because they kind of got it started as far as kind of a weird thing, but when they came back under Bob McKillop, they had not done very well at their arena to kind of commemorate those teams, and it's really, it puts in perspective to where the conference was at that time as far as I guess a major basketball conference throughout the country, and even when you get up to the 91 Bucks, it was a good league then. I mean, ETSU, pretty much dominated for 4 straight years, but it wasn't. I wouldn't say that was an easy domination. It wasn't like they were beating folks. They were beating folks pretty good, but they weren't routinely doing some of the things those West Virginia teams were doing, night in, night out, the Southern Conference teams. What they did in the tournament that year, Appalachian State Championship game, that was a pretty good indication of how good that East Tennessee State team was, and just how special, I guess, that 4-year run was for them. And even a year later, I guess, after that, they go in and beat in Arizona and then lose to the Pac-5.
Yeah.
There was still a bunch of talent still left over to go in and beat an Arizona team that some people had thought could go a long way in that tournament.
Of course, back in those days, Arizona was known for choking in the NCAA tournament, but nevertheless, ETSU is going to take the victory, and it was somewhat a lopsided victory, as a matter of fact, and it was very satisfying for me because, quite frankly, after the loss in the NCAA tournament in '91, I really got to the point of saying, okay, well, wait a minute, what good is this team if it doesn't? I'm sick. I want to do more than just smell perfume, that sort of thing.
Even the loss to Oklahoma, ETSU could very well have won that game.
Exactly. And I mean, I do think that there should be a little more criticism. Not, that wasn't a foul on Mister. There should have been more of, you had the ball with 4 seconds left and you couldn't get it past half court. I mean, come on. What kind of a drawing up a play is that? I mean, it's the same thing, my criticisms. I really and truly believe that had Bob McKillop played the last 16 seconds better in 2008, Davidson would have won a national championship because they almost had beaten North Carolina in Chapel Hill in the regular season that year. Would have played them in a neutral site. North Carolina, if anybody remembers, just laid an absolute egg. Be considered. They were in the Ohio Valley Conference back in those days, so don't consider those a SoCon team. And I got to also be strictly, totally honest with you. I know George Washington was in the SoCon up until 1965. I remember George Washington being a good team in the Atlantic 10 under Mike Jarvis, but I really don't know their history in the SoCon. What, by the way, John Hooper, did they have any success, George Washington, before they dropped football and got
I looked at them, but there were a few Richmond teams that were really good. But obviously, mostly if you look at the history, there were in the championship games to say a Furman or a Davidson who were back then. I think that if you look at the 60s and 70s, I would say Davidson, number one, and then Furman did really well. So they were kind of national attention to the league, and then you get up into the 80s and 90s. You saw a lot of great signs that were for him, and a year before they had come into the league, they were really good. A very good big man post player, and John Crash really did have some great shoes. They actually ended up playing Tulsa that year, and in that tournament, I guess it was I want to say it was the 99 tournament, I guess, run in the last 7 minutes, but I just couldn't close it out. And Tulsa was very good.
Then it wasn't Buzz Peterson their coach?
Yes. I think he was. Actually, no, he was still at Appalachian.
Oh, he still was at, yeah, that's right. He was still at Appalachian until 2000. That's right, yeah. And then
probably, was it Tubby Smith? Yeah. Was he
possibly, yeah. I mean, but that shows you what it took to knock out C of C, and probably also why C of C is so highly regarded as a basketball program to this day, even though it was only, we got numbers ranking them, and remember, here we go. We're 1 point away from national title. West Virginia, Davidson 2008 with Steph Curry. I think they were one bad Bob McKillop play draw from winning the national title.
I still don't know why Jason Richards is shit.
Yeah, I don't know why they're taking the ball with 16 seconds left up the court so casually. I mean, it's like running off clock. I don't understand that. West Virginia in 58, the year before the national championship. Again, Davidson was number 8 in the country in 69. Hard to argue there. And then the number 17 team of 1991, ETSU, with Mr. Jennings, Alan LaForce, Greg Dennis, and all of those guys. So there you are. That's the top 5. And you like 64 Davidson, which was the preseason number 1 by Sports Illustrated. Right. You're telling me is your number 6. That's it. So ahead of some of the great teams that we've mentioned from wherever. I want to go in right now. What could not?
Well, Stanford, I think is. I mean, if you look in the league that really has that kind of offensive prowess at the quarterback, and then I guess 3 of their receivers were all conference in the preseason. So I think that I don't know. I've always wanted to do an experiment on this, but I think that teams that play an air raid offense like that always have a tendency, or a spread attack, always have a tendency to be a little bit softer on defense. And I mean, I can't say that will be the case for Stanford, but I think that a team that they could come up against that would be kind of a kryptonite would be like a Wofford or a Furman that are pretty physical, and even a Chattanooga who's been pretty physical.
Yeah.
We've seen them have a lot of success against Stanford. Even last year, when Chattanooga had a down year, they go into Stanford and win. I think those type of teams are tough for them to play. The lines in the league, I would say Wofford, Furman, and Chattanooga. Those 2 teams, if they can get pressure with the front 3 or 4, they'll cause more problems for Stanford, because I don't think Hodges is as good of a thrower on the run as he is maybe if you just let him sit back there and pick you apart.
Well, Well, let me ask this. Your thoughts on Logan Marchi as the starting quarterback of ETSU? Can it get him out of 8th place? I mean, how a quarterback?
I think they can do well. I saw a little bit of Logan play. He's simple. He's a pretty big guy. He's got a good arm. I think they can do well. I'm a little bit surprised that it was that easily knocked off Austin Herring to the starting job. But I think that also, if Coach Sanders is coming in and trying to make this his team, I think he kind of put down a marker and said, this is my quarterback, and we're going to change some things up around here and see what we can do. And you'll see a lot of new head coaches do that when they have a guy come in or transfer in. They make that their guy, and I think that might be what Coach Sanders is looking at as far as the type of offense ETSU is going to try to run this year. It may be better off with Logan at quarterback than say Austin.
I think he extends the field, at least statistically. That's been the case. And yeah, you said it, but he's Carl Torbush's guy. You do the math. Anyway, and, playing against Notre Dame, before will help him play against Tennessee in a couple of weeks as well, and all that. By the way, if that means that ETSU beats Tennessee, I do think that means that Randy Sanders by the middle of September will be the coach at Tennessee. But anyway, let's point that out. Hey, I am really up against it. I wanted to talk a little bit about the soccer, but we just don't have the time here. SoCon John Hooper, I want to thank you for your time. And check out on Mid-Major Madness, top 5 teams in the history of SoCon basketball. Hey, maybe with this NET ranking instead of RPI, if you do go on the road and beat those big boys, maybe the day will 20 years for a good program like CFC to not make the tourney. Overdue. Tri-City Sports Now, some baseball notes when we return after this. Okay.
Destination Tires.
All right.